Hi, and welcome to the Data Experience Podcast. I'm Oluwatoyin Adebi, and I'll be your host for today. So we are welcoming our listeners to the second season of the podcast. On season one of the podcast, we mainly discussed different data roles and their experiences. So we had a lot of guests who came around to share their experiences. And this season, we're exploring perspectives across the tech ecosystem. So we are hearing from professionals from different fields how their experience has been with data. Today, we are joined by Stephen Ovadje. Stephen is a seasoned leader and an innovator with over 2 decades of experience spanning marketing, analytics, and strategic planning. Stephen has held pivotal roles, including Chief Marketing Officer at Best Egg, where he previously served as the Chief Consumer Lending Officer, and is also the co-founder of Rhofurd Energy Limited and Acadaplus, showcasing his entrepreneurial spirit. And Stephen began his career in 2004, and he has excelled in diverse leadership positions across renowned organizations like Chase Sapphire, Mallet Funding, Barclays, America, and Deloitte. And his experience in data-driven decision-making and interdisciplinary collaboration makes him the perfect guest for this season's exploration of perspectives across the tech system. So, hi, Stephen. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Tony. I really appreciate that introduction.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Okay, so let's just jump right into it. So, on Data Experience Podcast, we always have like an icebreaker section where we just want to get to know what you've been up to lately. So, the first question I would ask is, what's a fun fact about you that most people don't know?
Interesting. I would say that I am, on the personal front, I am the last of 10 children. So I come from a very big family. And, my another interesting one related to that in terms of coming from big families is that my maternal grandfather had up to 14 wives at some point.
Okay, so I would ask another one, and I wanted to ask, what's the most adventurous thing you've also done outside of your demanding professional life?
Most adventurous thing I've ever done. Let's see, a couple of things that come to mind. I love to travel. That's one of my passions is traveling and getting to explore different parts of the world. And recent travels took me to Costa Rica, where I was able to do some zip lining over, a rainforest, which was pretty exciting for me. I never thought I would do something like that, but that was really exciting. That's probably one of the most thrilling activities that I've done. That once I got into it, I really enjoyed it. But we'll see. The jury's still out as to if I will try that activity again.
That's nice. And I was thinking maybe you probably want to try skydiving also. Is that
Nope.
Alright.
I know my limits. That's definitely one that I won't be trying anytime soon.
Yeah.
Like,
All right. Yeah, thank you, sir. Okay, so the last one. So if you were not in tech, which other career paths do you think you would be in?
so I think about teaching quite a lot. I think if I wasn't in this space or even pursuing this particular corporate path or the path of entrepreneurship, I think being some kind of professor at a university would be something that would be very attractive to me. Learned so much from so many different people, and I've been mentored by so many different people over the course of my career and my life in general. So having an opportunity to impart some of that knowledge and share that with people. I love engaging with younger folks as well, and having discussions and debate on the issues and the challenges. And I strongly believe that the next generation is going to make the world better than we in my generation have the path that we've charted so far. I think they're going to do a better job than we are because they just have so much more optimism about the future and so much more, call it control of their own destiny or belief in their control over their own destiny than we have. So to be a part of that journey and to be able to share some of my experiences to help shape what could be the future of the world and play my little small part in that would be very attractive. So it is not something that exist in an alternate universe for me. I truly believe it will be something that I'll take on at some point, more likely after I've retired from, call it, corporate life or all the other ventures that I'm involved in. I think being able to slow down and settle into that path would be very rewarding for me.
That's good to hear, sir. And talking about mentorship, so Stephen and I worked together at Acadaplus. He was my CEO, and I've learned a lot from you, sir. Thank you, sir, for being accessible.
Thank you for that, Tony.
Okay, so now we're going into the data part of the discussions now, and still ask some questions about your early life and education. So I would like to ask, so reflecting on your childhood in Nigeria, did any experiences or influences impact your future trajectory into leadership positions and technology itself?
So I would say growing up, I was lucky to have, like mentioned earlier, a big family that I could, of siblings and, cousins and extended family that I could, learn from, look up to and observe and see where I could make not necessarily make an impact, but see where there was interest in a passion for what I wanted to do with my life. In school, I was attracted to a variety of different subjects. So I was never that student that was like, hey, you're a science student or you're a social science student, or you're a pure art student. Now, I did know the arts were attractive to me, but I knew I didn't necessarily want to pursue, for example, a career in the fine arts or things like that. But it was something that I could do well enough, if you want to call it that. So I think being able to draw from experiences of others really started helping narrow my path towards where I am today. So one of the early things that I would say was that sparked an interest that has a clear line to where I am today is one of my older brothers who studied engineering, ended up getting an internship at a company. I believe they're still around. They used to be called Resourcery Limited in Nigeria. And he was really an intern that was helping it with computer setup and maintenance for the company's clients. And through him, I got exposed to basic programming for the first time and also PC gaming. So I remember playing a video game called Prince of Persia, as
Right.
well as, Persia, what's it called, Pac-Man back then on PC, and it just really changed my life and amazed me in a very different way. That you could have these fun and engaging things through the computer, but then also have it as a productivity tool, whether it was for word processing or for managing financials, like, using Microsoft tools at the time. So that was the first exposure that I had that really piqued my interest in the world of, call it, computing, and how computer science, computer engineering, and data and analytics, really play an integral role in business.
That's great, sir. Okay. So you did mention this at the introduction. So even he has a Bachelor of Science degree from Drexel University, and he also has two advanced degrees. One which is a Master's in Information Systems from Drexel University. Okay, that's from Drexel University, and I think the Bachelor of Science is from Lincoln University Computer Science. Then
That's
also,
correct.
yeah, the MBA from Wharton University. So I think it's also speaking to it, like you saying, like you've always been interested with a variety of subjects. Yeah, that's great to hear, sir. So I would like to know. So back in university, maybe at Drexel University or Lincoln University or even Wharton, did you connect to any individuals who later became important collaborators or whose perspectives significantly influenced your thinking back in school? Your colleagues, or it could maybe was even people not from your department in school.
Absolutely. I would say one of the biggest influences from my days in college, and someone I went to college with and later reconnected with and also became my co-founder, is Deji Mabogunje. We met during my freshman year at Lincoln University. Deji was also a computer science major and was a someone who not only was doing the theoretical part as a student, but was also always had some kind of side project going on, whether it was supporting another business that had a contract with the city of Philadelphia, or just building a website or something that he was always doing on the side, which that was something I always admired about him. And we had an opportunity to reconnect when we both worked for Deloitte briefly. And that was back I was at Deloitte between 2012 and 2010. Sorry, 2012 and 2014. That was after my MBA. So we met each other in school. I attended Lincoln from 99 to 2003. We were in touch, but then really reconnected, close to a decade later, and had an opportunity to start really talking about how we could make an impact in Nigeria and leveraging both our experiences. He had continued down the path of computer science very deeply. I was now trending more to be on the business side of things, but still with a strong connectivity to data and analytics. And with that, we came up with the concept of Acadaplus, which was really the vision was to be an analytical platform for schools to drive better outcomes for students, parents, and to enhance the productivity of teachers. Specifically. So that was I would say is one of the biggest influences I've had. But clearly in while I was in university, one of my professors, Dr. Ali Shabazz, he was my calculus professor. And he was just someone that really inspired me to just, work hard, put in my best effort, and got me excited about, mathematics and, again, data and what it meant, right, in the real world. Because sometimes you sit in the classroom, it's like, okay, I'm learning all this stuff, but what does it really mean? How does it really impact my life? I felt he did a good job of connecting the theory to the practical, right, and making it make sense for us that were in the classroom.
That's great to hear, sir. So, the next question I'll just ask, this is about your career journey. So, you started as a market information manager. So, I would like to know this initial role, how you played the groundwork for your subsequent leadership positions, particularly in terms of understanding market dynamics and the power of information.
Yeah, that's a great question. So I took that role while I was at Bank of America, and that was something that really exposed me to how executives leverage data and information to make decisions. So within that role, I did focused on a function called executive reporting, but then also did some things around conducting customer surveys, interpreting those surveys, and using those surveys to drive decisions around product, around improving service to customers as well. So it was a bit broad in that sense. But if you think about it, at the time I was in the credit card division. So really understanding what does success mean? How do we measure success on all the initiatives that we drive? And back then it was around outstanding credit card balances, usage of the card. So how much sales are we driving through the card? But then also looking at rewards. What's the engagement level rewards for for our customers? How much is this costing us to provide those rewards? And then also being able to look at all of that data, whether it was by geographic region as necessary, because when you look at it that way, then you can go to leaders and managers and say, hey, you're underperforming in this area. Where are the opportunities for you to improve? Or here's an area where you're doing really well. Here are some how do we lean into that, and how do we take what you're doing so well in your division and apply it to the other areas? My role was also with partnering with external data providers to understand what was happening in the overall marketplace so that we could bring that external insight in. Executives at the time could have a broader view of the business that says, Here's how the competitive environment is changing. Here's how customer preferences are changing. Here's how customer demographics are changing and the ability or willingness to engage with us as a brand or engage with our category in terms of our products. Here's how all of those things may be changing, and therefore prompt them to start thinking ahead to how do we outsmart or outrun our competitors? How do we serve our customers better? Because we understand what their pain points are today. We understand how their preferences are evolving. And also we understand the level of satisfaction or dissatisfaction they have with our products and features to give us the right information and data to be able to invest appropriately in those products, features, benefits, and services that will help us to capture more share and ultimately drive that deep customer loyalty, right, that keeps them coming back to us when they have specific needs that the company could fulfill.
That's great, sir. And just seeing how data, the important role it's played in decisions that were made. Talking about credit card system. So I know also the US already has a robust credit card system where people can use their credit cards to buy things. And even in Canada, they also have an established system, and same with the UK. So I stay in Nigeria, and I think now we have some fintechs trying to bring up some of that, but it's still not. I wouldn't say I don't know, but I think for most of them that are bringing it up, it's not well stabilized. So looking at the data, and since you've worked already in the sector, do you think Nigeria is ready for this?
Well, that's a great question. I would say I'm an eternal optimist. So I always believe that anything is possible. For things to, when I look at Nigeria specifically, yes, I think the market is primed for it. As you mentioned, the fintechs are already starting to do interesting things in the space, but the conditions have to be right. And there are a few things to consider. One is, call it the regulatory landscape has to be set up in a way that credit card companies or banks or fintechs can come in and actually have the ability to set up businesses that will be successful. So the landscape has to be in such a way that it actually creates the space and opportunity for businesses to effectively compete and serve consumers. I'll say one example of a positive thing that the Nigerian government or the CBN has done. So the ability of the BVN, right, the bank verification number as a policy, and even the NIN as a way of really identifying Nigerians, right? So when it comes to knowing your customer, those two policies together are really powerful in driving the ability of banks or fintechs to be able to underwrite customers effectively. Because if you think about it, the environments that you mentioned, look at the UK, look at the US, look at Canada. Why are they so successful? Because they have a strong, call it, credit reporting infrastructure. So when a consumer takes a loan, there's an incentive, especially an unsecured loan, right, where there's not collateral tied to it. Having credit reporting that is fair and is well recognized, and there's faith in the system. It creates an environment where consumers are incentivized to act properly. So because they know that if they default on a loan or they act on the loan maliciously or otherwise, it inhibits their ability to reaccess the credit system, right, to either finance their careers or finance things that are important to them and to their families. So that is so fundamental and foundational to creating the trust and the environment that is required for banks or fintechs to be able to scale not just credit cards, but other lending products more broadly, right? So I think take that what exists in these countries we talked about and extrapolate it to Nigeria. We're not quite there yet, but the foundational elements are there, right? There are some players that are already trying to do some things in that space, but it's going to take time to get there. So the roadmap from my perspective is leaning into the ability to leverage the BVN to understand consumers' transactions and use that as a basis for for lending, understanding who the customer is, right, through the NIN. So at least you understand the customer knows that, okay, you know who they are, right? And you can, in the case of default, you can actually work out arrangements for them in terms of repayment. Those are some of the key ingredients that I believe that will help set the stage for further growth. Another thing is also the mindset, right? Nigerians are not, in general, we're not wired, right, to take on debt, right? We're very much based on a cash economy and, here's what I have. I can afford it and I can pay for it. And we're used to borrowing through the informal system because historically banks just haven't been there for the small business or the small consumer or the consumer, sorry, directly. So over time, there's also an awareness, call it campaign that needs to happen that to educate the consumer on why, lending or borrowing from banks or fintechs actually helps them, right, improve their lives or helps them move up the economic ladder because they might be able to take out loans to invest in their businesses or invest in skills that will help them better their lives and for those of their families.
Yeah, right. So, and about loans for Nigerians. Yeah, so even me, skeptical about taking loans. Yeah, so I really understand that. Like, it's the same way a lot of Nigerians feel. Thank you for sharing that, sir. Okay, so another question I would like to ask is still about your career journey, and you successfully transitioned through various roles, and I think like the first couple ones are technical. Then after a while, you switch to the business sides of things. So I'd just like to know how you approached adapting to new responsibilities and overcoming challenges at each stages of this. Maybe perhaps also highlighting a key learning from one of these transitions.
Yes. So it's interesting. I always say to people that my career path is it's non-traditional. I didn't pick a lane early and just pursue that lane. And I think it's also reflective of what I had mentioned about growing up and even looking at the subjects that I took when I was in secondary school. I look at my SSC results, and it's a mix of sciences, math, and social sciences, right? It was a fair balance where I could go anywhere. I think that is also reflective of how my career has evolved. But the one thing I would say, the one constant is always, there was always an attachment to how, you know, data and insights ultimately lead to better outcomes for businesses and for people. So that's the one thread I would say that connected it all. So when I think about my career, I never really set out in a particular way to say, here's exactly where I wanted to be. I knew over time I wanted to drive more impact. I wanted to take on more responsibility, but I never really said, hey, I want to be CEO or CFO or even an entrepreneur at one point. It was always started with, kind of what's interesting to me right now and where, what kind of impact really can I drive? And the impact side of things is really what drove more of the entrepreneurial items. But let's stick to the corporate path. So early on, it was really all about having a broad base of experiences, all right, to really explore where I found interest and again, drove impact. So I go back to Bank of America when I was in market information manager, really driving decision support for executives. When I went to Barclays, I stuck with that intersection of data analytics insights and business outcomes by taking on a role leading marketing analytics to support the travel entertainment portfolio. And really it was a technical role, and it started, what was so interesting about that role was that not only was it technical from an analytics perspective, but it was also had a good intersection with the business side and decision making. So while I did things like developing NPV models to understand the profitability of marketing investment decisions that were being made, I also worked on doing deal valuations. So we had brands that we partnered with, like American Airlines or Carnival Cruise Lines. And part of my job was saying if we're looking for another brand to partner with, being able to evaluate what the economic impact of that deal would be. What does it mean for us? What does it mean for the partner's customers? What does it mean for the partner themselves, in order to ensure that when we do come together, it was a deal that was economically beneficial. So that piqued an interest for me on, I kind of wanted to be closer to the business, hence my decision to pursue an MBA at the time. So, and that's what took me to the Wharton School. And there, I really focused on finance and entrepreneurship. I really wanted to understand, uh, what drives businesses to make the financial decisions that they make. But then having an interest in ultimately starting something on my own, it was always an itch that I had. I felt like having that formal education and training would be foundational for me. And the rest of it, as time went on, it started to become more opportunistic. So as I mentioned previously, I met with Deji. I reconnected with Deji, and we were able to put our heads together and say, hey, this could be impactful. Education is a space in Nigeria where we haven't really applied tech to in a meaningful way. And and we believe that tech could be transformative for that space. And I continue to believe that even till this day. So the same way the smartphone was able to help Nigeria leapfrog having landlines and really transformed the Nigerian economy, I think tech and today AI can transform the educational sector. So those were some of the ingredients that I would say over the course of my career, to summarize it, is being open-minded, having a thirst for learning, and being proactive about opportunities that come up, and and seizing those opportunities, ensuring that they align with, what your values are and where you believe you could really make an impact. I think those things were part of what led to, dare I say, use the word success, all right, over my career so far.
Yeah, that's good to hear, sir. And speaking of Deji, so he's also someone I want on the podcast, and just like you mentioned, what you said about him, I would call him. There are full stack developers who do the back end and front end side of coding. I think I'll call him a full stack technologist. He has talking about his skills. He has a lot of skills in coding itself, back end, front end, even in data itself, and also in DevOps. So yeah, it's someone I'm also we're looking forward to having on this podcast. Yeah. So
Awesome.
yeah, thank you, sir. And learning about your experience also. Yes, that's great, sir. And you had also mentioned Acadaplus. I wanted to ask about the entrepreneurial side. So, while at Acadaplus, was there a pivotal moment or decision that taught you a valuable lesson about leadership and strategy, or perhaps the role of data in the education technology space?
Yes, I would say we had quite a few pivotal moments, I would say, but the biggest one was really the key pivot we made in the business. And that was really early days. So we did a lot of research before we actually started the business, and trying to understand willingness to pay, trying to understand what the market in terms of the current players and who was fulfilling the need that or the gap we're trying to still. And our vision initially, as I mentioned, was to create an analytical platform that folks in the ecosystem could leverage to drive better outcomes primarily for students. But if you think about teachers improving their productivity, giving direct access to students' data to parents, right? They don't have to wait to the end of the year to be able to see their child's progress, being able to drive predictive analytics to teachers to help them understand, hey, based on the data we're seeing on, say, particular student, they are likely to have this kind of outcome. So here are some potential interventions, right, a teacher could take to help get the student to course correct. And we thought this would be very powerful given that, average class sizes were very large in Nigeria. So having this to be a companion to the teacher to help them focus their teaching and instruction in a way that is customized to the student, again, driving better outcomes for them. So that's very exciting. Well, we found out very quickly that that was a very lofty goal, given what was happening on the ground. We quickly learned that in order to be able to create this platform, you needed to first digitize the data because a lot of schools, a large majority of schools, were still leveraging manual processes and paper to even drive things as simple as, report cards, taking attendance. All of that was still a very manual process. So the big pivot for us was to actually switch the business model, at least to start, on something that was more focused on productivity and digitization. So how do we get teachers to take attendance on a digital platform? How do we get parents to access that data through a mobile app or through a web browser? How do we get teachers to also I mentioned take attendance, actually record their grades, as well as generate report cards, and doing it in a way that takes a lot of the manual processes out of the system, right? Where all they're doing is just entering the data and all the computation is done by the platform, as well as making it easier for administrators to audit the process to ensure its integrity, and also enabling administrators with tools to still drive, better productivity out of their staff. So that was the pivot that we made. And it actually worked well for us because the goal that we had in terms of, analytics and data, that sounded all well and good, but we've honestly found that it wasn't really resonating as much with a large majority of folks who would eventually become our clients. But because we understood the immediate pain point, which was, hey, we can drive better productivity so we can save teachers time, right? By making their lives easier, we can save administrators time in terms of generating report cards. We can create a digital repository of all these report cards. Those were things that were resonating with them. So being able to listen to them and take that feedback and use that to drive our product roadmap was really important. So a key lesson there for us was really, you may have goals and objectives for your business, and that is absolutely critical, but really listening to the data from your customers and developing a way that you can get that continuous feedback to help evolve your product is important. And that pivot, I think, enabled us to continue to, run Acadaplus and deliver value to clients and grow our revenues while still being able to invest in our long-term vision, right, of really empowering schools with data and insights to drive better outcomes for students.
That's great to hear, sir. And I think just like you said, any decision that you're making without data, I would say it's not a smart decision. That's great to hear,
That's
sir.
right.
So, okay, so now back to the corporate world a bit. I'd like to ask, so having worked in different organizations with varying levels of data maturity, what were some of the key challenges you encountered while trying to collaborate with teams that might not have had a strong data-driven culture?
That's a great one. So I won't mention specific names, but actually, let me think about this. I think there was, as an example, I can use from my time at Deloitte, where we had a client that grew a lot through acquisitions. So if you think about it, they had a core company, and over time, they just acquired other smaller companies and absorbed them. And what they started realizing pretty quickly was that the data was very disjointed. So each company was still, to an extent, running its own, call it data warehouses, or managing their pricing systems and their marketing and all of that, right? Or their customer CRM data was all essentially localized, right? For the most part, there were areas where there was integration. And very quickly, what they found was that they were losing a lot of value from those acquisitions because pricing, for example, was not managed centrally. Now, of course, you have to adjust for the nuances of the local markets you're operating in, but there was a set strategy. So a customer in one region may be, entitled to a certain level of discount, but a customer in a region that may just be adjacent to it, right, may be getting even less of the discounts even though they are now on the same company. And imagine what happens when customer A talks to customer B,
Yes.
what kind of satisfaction that would drive. Now, that wasn't a problem when there were two different companies. So that's a critical example that just tells you how not having data infrastructure set up the right way, or not even focusing on how you extract value out of data and insights, can eventually not only cost you money in terms of lost revenue, but also, cost you value in terms of, overall valuation, right, as a business. Because obviously, the more you can grow your revenues, the more it has an impact on, your perception, right, in terms of from a market perspective. So part of the work we did there was really getting all of the sub-regions and companies, legacy companies, on one CRM platform, and then helping them really centralize their pricing strategies and pricing approaches, while, as I mentioned, accounting for regional differences and regional approaches, but just ensuring that didn't matter what region you were in overall, there was a consistent way of addressing customers. There was a consistent way of understanding the value of the customer to the enterprise, and then setting up the appropriate strategies to ensure that those customers are retained, engaged, they're loyal, and they're continuing to do repeat business, right, with the enterprise. So that was something that really started with looking at the data, understanding where there are gaps, and then saying, okay, what's the path forward? And then truly understanding, if we, what investment we have to make to be able to get the most out of this data, understanding that there is real value that could be created by doing some of the things that I just mentioned.
Thank you for that, Steve. And I believe that given companies that are starting out, they need to pay attention to their data infrastructure. So you had mentioned that. I believe it's one important thing that they need to make sure it's ready and it's in a good position before going into their business of things, because most of the decisions that you make will be based on that data that you already have saved in your warehouse. Yes. Thank you for that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I agree with you. That's such a great point. I would take, now that example I gave was of, a company that was, more relying on legacy platforms, didn't really invest in data. But then on the extreme side, worked for a startup where, to your point, from the ground up, from day zero, it was really a focus on data and ensuring that data was easily accessible and was in the hands of everybody in the organization. So at any given point in time, everybody understood exactly what the KPIs were, and then understood exactly where we stood in terms of the KPIs. So if they were doing something that was going to impact any one of those KPIs, they were very clear on where the gaps were and what they could be doing, or would ask the question what they could be doing better, right, to ensure that they're driving their metrics and their outcomes in the right direction.
That's great to hear. I think let's go a little bit into fintech. So, like Nigeria now, we've seen an explosion of fintech startups, and the Nigeria markets and even markets outside of Nigeria and Africa. We are more like we are in our fintech moment. But I want to ask, like, from your vantage point, do you think this fintech movement is primarily driven by technology advancement, customer needs, or by the strategic application of data?
I think it's a little bit of those three things, to be honest with you, I would say. But I would say, if I were to rank it in order of importance, so you said unmet needs, you said technological advancements, and then what was the last one around data?
Strategic application of data.
Yes. So I think it's a little bit of all those things. Now, to me, the application of data is foundational, right? So that's like, because it is through data you understand what unmet customer needs exist, right? So that is just, to me, that is foundational. But I would say the advent of the fintechs, or just tech in general, is really driven by that, right? There's a gap in the marketplace. Folks understand that we've always had these problems of sending payments efficiently across borders or to pay for goods and services. we are a society for the longest time, we're very focused on using cash, right? And then if you think about what we had talked about earlier around lending, folks who needed loans have gotten them, but they've gotten them in inefficient ways. So the advancements in technology are now coming to the point where folks can leverage technology in a much cheaper way than they could have done, say 20 or 30 years ago, right? We don't have you don't need to build a server farm, right, to be able to start a business. You could just say, I just leverage cloud computing, right, to be able to get this business going. Open an Amazon account or open an account with Main One, right, and you have cloud space for you to host whatever application that you're building. So the advancements in technology have been very critical to democratize entrepreneurship to an extent. And in fact, you may not even decide to build an app. You could just leverage existing infrastructure that is out there, right? So if you want to start a fintech tomorrow, there are already banking as a service platforms out there that you can leverage to build the core architecture that you need to get going, right? And then you can, of course, modify and enhance around the edges to make it your own, and enable you to get to market a lot faster than if you had to build everything from scratch. In summary, I would say yes, it really is. It starts with, the data, understanding where the opportunities are, where the pain points are, where the gaps are, and then being able to leverage the technological advances around, mobile phones, cloud computing, AI, and ML today, for sure. That's playing a critical role. You don't have to be a developer. You don't have to hire as many developers, right, or work with as many developers to bring something to business as you needed to even 5 years ago, right? Because AI is driving better productivity with developer. I think the confluence of those three things, but there's an order of operations to it, is what I would say.
That's great, sir. So now to this question. So many are saying data is the new oil, and even for me, I think it was that first that attracted me to data. So my background and has always been in mathematics in secondary school, and even in my university, I did a mathematical course, statistics. Yeah. So, with people saying data is a new oil, in the context of fintech, especially with vast amounts of user and transaction data being generated, I would like to ask if you agree with this analogy. Then, how do you think fintech companies can best leverage this new oil responsibly and ethically?
It's a great question. I would say absolutely that I agree with that because it's just so fundamental to everything that we do. So for fintechs, my advice, again, because I work for a fintech today and I leverage it, data, is prioritize using it across the value chain. I think the most important place to focus on or most important places I would say to focus on are on understanding your customer and the market around that customer. So what are your customers' needs? What are their pain points? How are they interacting with your products or substitutes of your product? And how can you continue to innovate around the experience that you provide when they use that product, right? Either when you acquire them, when you service them, or when you try to retain them. Because ultimately, it's about customer loyalty, right? To be able to continue to drive value from customers. So it always has to start there, because the minute you start paying attention to that, that's when you start losing share. And then it becomes a self-fulfilling, cycle that is spiraling in the wrong direction. But then also leveraging data to understand, your business is important. Is very important. What are the things that we're investing in? Before we make an investment, let's forecast what that could mean. What's the upside scenario? What's the downside? Are we comfortable with it? If the downside happens, are we comfortable with it? And if we're uncomfortable with it, are there alternatives, right, to help us work around that downside before we make that decision? And after it's made, how are we monitoring progress? What are the metrics we're using to measure, progress? I think those are going to be important. But a lot of those things now, You can do a lot of that with AI today. So you can actually you save a lot of money, right? Because they're hiring experts to do a lot of that work that, again, 5 years ago, you'd have needed a lot of not only data scientists, but also analysts, right, to solve some of those challenges. Today, you just need to hire a core set of, data scientists and analysts, and the rest of it you can augment by leveraging AI and machine learning to drive to the insights that you need to succeed as a business. So yeah, I couldn't agree with that statement more. And it's about leveraging it to understand your customer, understand the market dynamics, and run your business effectively.
Thank you, sir. Okay, so this next question I would ask, it's about interdisciplinary collaboration and like your role of like the different companies you work with, you have to collaborate with different departments. So I'd like to ask that as a leader, how do you actively cultivate a culture that encourages open communication and effective collaboration among individuals with diverse professional backgrounds and areas of expertise?
Yeah, I think it starts with the culture. When you say cultivate a culture, you first have to define what that culture is and what you're trying to achieve. What's important to you as a founder and or the founding team, and how do you propagate that through the organization? I would tell you, again, you hear me talk about the customer quite a bit, right? But if you think about, let's keep the Nigerian context. Yes, we are all Nigerians, but we are also Nigerians of diverse, religion, ethnic background. We speak different languages. We have different tastes and preferences. So if you're trying to serve that broad market, it will be great if you have a team that understands that broad base of customers as well. So if you're making decisions about, a product that is going to serve that broad base, it'd be great if you have people in the room who may understand the specific preferences of certain folks within that are representative of your customer base. So it starts with that, but then also understanding that, ideas are not localized to you as a founder or to your core leadership team. The best ideas can come from someone who is just answering the phone or even the janitor who's cleaning the office. But create an environment where every voice is valuable and every voice is heard. Create an environment where you can have respectful debate and discussion without it getting personal allows you to take those ideas and truly, vet them and put them through the ringer so that when you know that when you're about to implement them, you have only the best ideas have made it through that process because you've encouraged an environment and a culture of open debate, right? That is also backed by facts and data, because you don't want to debate just based on opinion, obviously, but you want that the diverse group of voices that is reflective of, the customers that you serve. You want to give them an environment where they feel empowered to speak up and to challenge in a respectful way, because all of those things will help shape better strategies that will enable your business to win in the marketplace.
Thank you so much. It's been an insightful conversation. And I think it's so we getting to the end of the episode. And I think I just have just two questions I would like to ask. The first one is your career haven't spanned diverse sectors like finance, energy, education, and now fintech that you are. Like you're currently the chief marketing officer at Bestech. So, what key insights have you gained about effectively bridging the gap between these industries through the strategic use of data and innovation?
Yeah, I think the biggest insights in terms of career is, I think, understanding that learning never stops. You always have to stay in tune with what's coming up next. You have to stay in tune to how the world is changing, how industries are changing, the role of technology and how it's continuously disrupting society is important. And more, you know, having specific expertise in an area will continue to remain important, but recognizing that, technology is coming for that. If there's anything you're doing that is going to be, automated away through AI, that's something you should be aware of. So always staying in tune and plugged in and upskilling yourself through training, through reading, attending conferences, talking to people in different sectors that you may not, have interacted with is absolutely key and is important. So that's one of the biggest lessons I would say I had is just always having that hunger, to learn and to grow and improve myself, personally has created the opportunity for me that, at least from my personal story, is that I can be plugged into a different situation and I can adapt effectively, right? So, as I said, I wasn't an art student or a social science student or a science student. I was kind of an all of the above student. And that's the path that I've chosen because I'm now what you may call a utility player because it doesn't matter the circumstance. Because I'm a fast learner, I'm a avid learner and consumer of, useful information, I can quickly get into a situation, assess what is necessary and, make a path towards making a positive impact in that scenario. I think over time, that's, probably where we're headed is that, technology will continue to be a tool that helps augment, the things that we're doing. And for us as individuals, we have to be nimble and flexible to the way you're making money today may not be the way you're making money tomorrow. And trying to stay ahead of the curve in terms of the disruptions that are continuously happening is going to be valuable. I think that's the most valuable, lesson I've learned, over my career.
Thank you so much for that. And I feel like the last question I had, you answered, should I say maybe 70% of it, but since it's still a
Okay.
final question, I'll still ask. Okay, so
Okay.
what key piece of advice would you offer to aspiring professionals who are looking to build successful careers in today's data-centric, yet increasingly interdisciplinary world?
Yes, to your point, I would say what I just said is,
Yeah.
always stay hungry, stay open to learning, always continuously improve yourself because, if you stay stagnant, you'll become irrelevant pretty quickly. Get mentors. There are folks who have lived lives ahead of you, who have made mistakes that you don't have to make. Be open to the advice of those folks who are mentors to you. Seek out people who are doing things that are of interest to you and learn from them. That's a huge piece of advice I try to give to young people is that, hey, you don't have to make the mistakes that other people have made. But in some cases, yes, you may have to make a mistake to learn, which is fine. Exactly. And the last thing I'll say is that, uh, resilience, building resilience personally and professionally is so key. I see a lot of young folks today that, they encounter adversity and it's hard for them to move on and move past it. And I always say, the world is too dynamic, right? For you to be bogged down in that. When you hit a snag, it's okay. Yes, this is failure, but the main question is you ask yourself is like, what have I learned from it? And how can I use those lessons to make my next attempt even more successful? Right? Talk to anybody that's successful in whatever field they're in. Failure has been an integral process of them getting to that success. And in fact, they have developed a knack for embracing failure in a way that because they know it is a core ingredient of success. The key thing is ensuring that as you learn from those mistakes, you build on the strengths over time, but then you're also setting up processes or setting up yourself in a way that you can actually set up yourself to fail small so that the pickup gets easier, right, the next time. So I'll conclude with that is that failure is not the end of the world. It is essentially a core ingredient to you succeeding. The big thing is how do you take the lessons and improve on your next attempts towards your path to success.
Thank you so much for that, sir. And overall, it's been an insightful conversation. And yes, thank you so much for granting us your time. we know out of your busy schedule, for giving us this time to speak on our podcast, Data Express podcast. Thank you so much for that. So, while I close it, I'd just like to ask, so you can catch Steve on LinkedIn, Stephen Ovadje on LinkedIn, if you want to connect with him. And I'd also like to ask, is there any other social media apps where we can connect with you, or it's just LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is really where I'm most active, sadly. And I probably should do a better job on Twitter or Instagram, but LinkedIn is where I'm most active. And this conversation has been amazing. Thank you and congratulations to you and your co-host on this podcast. I think it's a great opportunity to have great conversations and to share knowledge and ideas that will only help us move the country forward because of the knowledge that we're able to gather from these discussions. So thank you on this platform.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. And for listeners, so thank you for listening. And Data Express podcast will be back for season 2, episode 2 very soon. So thank you so much, and bye.
Bye, everyone.